Welcome back. The new federal government AI use case inventory shows an explosion in instances of AI use across government. One example is the Department of Health and Human Services. Its AI inventory is up 64% over last year's inventory. Geoff Browning is Director of Global Government Affairs and Public Policy at ServiceNow. Geoff, welcome. Thanks for being on the program. You recently proposed what you call an AI control tower. What would that tower control, Geoff?
Sure. Well, I think in our experience across the public and private sectors, the organizations that get this right aren't necessarily the ones that move the fastest. They're the ones that get governance right first and then scale. And I think there are two parts to that. One is thinking through some difficult questions, and then two is operationalizing your answers to those questions. So on the first side, what can it touch? What can it not touch? What types of cases always default to a human? What's the role of the human? How is that managed over time? How do you track these assets all the way from their ingest through their output? And we were talking earlier about how AI is only as good as the data it consumes, is becoming part of the infrastructure, needs to comport with federal laws and requirements. At the end of the day, I think agencies, just like Fortune 500s, need to think through those questions and come to those decisions. Then vendors can come in and help. That can be through shared responsibility models, or it can be through things like our AI control tower, which has pre-built functionality, for example, to measure maturity against things like the NIST risk management framework.
It strikes me that in answering a series of questions like you just asked, one of the challenges might be getting agencies to answer their own questions honestly. Is that something that you've seen? And if so, where do agencies usually go wrong in understanding where they are?
Well, I think one thing we've seen that's positive from the administration is kind of building upon this requirement to not only have an inventory of use cases, but then look at it and make a judgment of which ones are deemed to be at higher risk, and then take certain mitigating steps for those risks. Now, obviously that's difficult, and it sort of varies from use case to use case. But I know, and I'm sure you do too, a lot of people who are working really hard at agencies to do this really well and facing those difficult questions. And I think one of the most fun things about my job is helping to support that.
What do you find when you talk to those people that is helpful for them to reshape, re-educate, retrain their workforces to be able to do this kind of work and to be prepared for the changes that are coming?
On the technical side, they want to see short time to value, but of course a part of that is you need skills, especially for emergent technologies. And one thing that we found across the private and public sectors, so we did a skills forecast where we worked with Pearson. We looked globally at about 10 million job postings, 3,400 job types or so across dozens of technology types, and forecasted what the skills needs will be. And we forecast a sharp increase in the need for AI governance skills, for data stewardship, auditing, all of those things. And I think that agencies are definitely seeing that need in their workforces. And one of the good things about ServiceNow is that we partner with about 100 universities globally to provide those skills to the private sector, and we make all that curriculum available for free to every one of our federal customers. So if anyone's interested in getting a certification, in learning about something that aligns to what their agency needs, if they're a ServiceNow customer, they already have access to that.
One of the things that we talked about before we went on the air, and a term that you use, is the importance of understanding and managing assets in the AI realm. What's that mean? What's an AI asset exactly, and how does an organization maximize it?
Sure. Well, maybe it makes sense to, I would say, start with software and hardware assets and then progress to AI. So obviously we have the Megabyte Act, which Congress passed, requires agencies to have an accurate inventory of the software they own and use automated tools to populate that inventory. Years later, it's been really difficult to implement that, and not for lack of trying. Maybe there's even an argument that Congress could pass a CIO Act to go along with the CFO Act. But for where we are now, it's critical to know what software and hardware are on your network, how they're configured, to be using automated tools to keep that up to date. And the configuration management piece here is critical for things like vulnerability response. When you introduce AI to that, all those dependencies become more tricky. And when you introduce agentic AI to it, the governance only becomes more important, because you may have different models, dependencies, and data flows from vendors. And that's one of the great things about the technology I get to work with every day at ServiceNow, is that we have robust integrations with hundreds of other technologies. Can run on Microsoft, GCP, or AWS, and we're able to sort of track a lot of those assets through their life cycles, regardless of who provides the model.
We have about 30 seconds left. What's around the corner that agencies should be thinking about? Not that they need to worry about today, but they might have to 6 months from now, a year from now, 18 months from now?
That's a really good question, and the first answer that comes to mind is quantifying the outputs that you're getting and the value that you're getting. Testing, evaluation, validation, verification are important, and I think the vendors who you're working with should hopefully be able to articulate that value, sometimes even using your own data, if it's allowed, to tell you what value you can expect. And I think, putting the money in on the front end is important, but making sure you're getting it back on the back end is critical. And that's, I think, also a strong suit for ServiceNow.
Geoff, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me today.
Honor and a privilege. Thank you.
You can read more about AI deployment across government on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, Treasury's big fraud fighting tool scales up. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in just a moment.